Donald Trump spent the past week attacking the daughter of the judge in his New York hush money trial. It started after an initial gag order was imposed, barring Trump from commenting publicly about lawyers, witnesses, court staff, and jurors in the trial, now scheduled to start April 15th. But in the days that followed, Trump attacked the judge's daughter at least 4 times on his Truth Social platform, posting her name, also posting a news story with photos of her. And he basically painted a target on this young woman's back, so much so the judge had to adjust the order to cover his own family members. And family members of the district attorney writing, quote, "This pattern of attacking family members of presiding jurists and attorneys assigned to his cases serves no legitimate purpose. It merely injects fear in those assigned or called to participate in the proceedings. Not only they, but their family members as well are fair game for defendants' vitriol." Yesterday, the judge expanded the gag order on Trump. Since then, Trump has still been attacking the judge, but notably, he has stopped just short of attacking the judge's daughter. Joining me now is MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. And first, I just want to start with this, that every time we do one of these, you can sort of lose sight of how just completely out of unprecedented it is, how different it is. It just does not happen. It doesn't happen in courtrooms. It doesn't happen with defendants. We're just in a totally different universe in which this man with a lot of power and a lot of followers is berating the judge's daughter.
Yeah, and every time you and I get together or I show up on other shows talking about the extraordinariness of the moment, that in and of itself becomes ordinary for viewers who then grow inoculated to this kind of behavior that is so far beyond the pale of what's acceptable in most courtrooms in the United States that we forget.
Or even what would be attempted. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, not even, like, yes, it's unacceptable, but even just like in a universe in which there are millions of criminal defendants, like this just doesn't really happen.
No, it doesn't, because most criminal defendants would face consequences far sooner than Donald Trump has.
So there have been some consequences. At least the judge order, the gag order has been expanded.
That's right.
And again, we've seen this. We saw this in the past with Engoron. We've seen in other places where he does know what he's doing, and so he stops just short.
Yeah, he stops just short. So what does he do now? He reposts other people's statements about the daughter in order to skirt the prohibition, which is framed as he can't make or direct others to make public statements about certain folks. He's not making a statement. He's not directing others to make a statement. He's merely republishing a statement, but that has the exact same thrust and gist to the things that he was saying before.
There's also now a request for recusal, which strikes me as, a not serious motion. I don't know what the...
It's worse than that, because it's the tail wagging the dog. You know, one of the things I noticed in the opposition that they wrote to the gag order just a couple of hours before Judge Merchan issued that gag order is they said all Trump was doing here was trying to amplify defense arguments about Merchan. So in his post about Merchan's daughter last week, they claimed that really what that was about was just trying to help his lawyers communicate to people how necessary recusal was. I don't want to rehash exactly what he posted, but that was not the aim. But here, what they're trying to do is conflate the political and the legal so that it all collapses into one, and take what would be opposition research in an ordinary political campaign and sort of migrate it into this case and the Trojan horse of a recusal motion.
Right. So I guess the question is, like, you know, there's always been this there's these two universes, right? Like we saw this in the litigation after the election 2020, which is they can make all the wild claims they want to and be hosted by Republican lawmakers and say all sorts of crazy stuff. As soon as those claims enter a courthouse, they got reduced to rubble. What good does it do them to be doing this in a court, I guess, is the question.
I think it's not that it does them any good in the court. It's that the court is the forum for their political campaign now, right? All the courts are his stage effectively, so that anything he says in court gets amplified, repeated, and becomes a part of his political messaging. It's not about trying to obtain a particular result in a court of law. It's about trying to obtain a result through the courts in our political system.
Right, because ultimately he doesn't care about winning in the court. He cares about winning the election because that's the only thing that will give him essentially the immunity and security from immediate prosecution and possible prison that he would otherwise be facing.
And perversely, I think he'd almost prefer to lose in these trial courts,
at
knowing
this point,
that
right.
it will help him electorally. And if he can only survive through November and prevail in the election, he doesn't have to worry about those initial losses.
Merchan's not going to recuse.
Merchan is not going to recuse.
All right, Lisa Rubin, thank you.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.